Niche Knacks. Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Niche Knacks, the one trans man podcast where I talk about my niche interest. If you're looking for something new to get into, this is the place to be. I'm Augustine, and this episode of Niche Knacks has a special guest to talk about.
Hello, I'm Jacelyn from MP4 or Media Per 4, and I'm here to talk about What Remains of Edith Finch.
Yay, I love those games. That's very exciting. So, tell us a little bit about What Remains of Edith Finch.
Oh, it's such a good game. It's definitely not the most niche game per se, but because it's fairly well known, but it is still an indie game.
I'd consider it niche.
Yeah. I definitely don't think it's everybody's cup of tea either. But it's a first-person exploration story game developed by Giant Sparrow and published by Annapurna Interactive. There's just a general basis of what the game is. It's also rated PEGI 16, or essentially like teens and older, for anybody worried about the rating of it, possibly, if they will be interested in it.
When was the game released?
It was released, let me see here, April of 2017 for Windows, PC, PS4, and Xbox One, and has since been released for Nintendo Switch, actually, which I found out while I was researching this and thought that was interesting.
I didn't even know it was on any console for that matter, but I'm quite familiar with Edith Finch and What Remains of Her, so definitely a big trigger warning for death and some dark themes.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was also released for iOS, apparently, so phones or tablets or whatever, so that's interesting as well, and then PS5 and Xbox Series X and S, so. Let me see here. The game is very story-based. That's mostly what the game is. You're just going through and playing through a story, essentially. At least that's how I would think of it, so if you watch somebody else play this game, it's basically like watching a TV show.
Yeah, I think, I watched it, I did not play the game myself, and I feel like if I played it, I don't know if I'd have a much different experience, because when you play through it, you are kind of almost watching a movie in a sense.
Yeah, pretty much, because I watched somebody play through it a while ago, and I started playing through it myself and never finished it yet. But, yeah.
Probably not missing much whether or not you watch or play it, but that doesn't mean it's bad by any means.
Yeah. It's just, like I said, heavily story-based. It's not super gameplay-based, but there is still, parts of it where you have to collect items and complete puzzles to progress through the different storylines. Because you're going through essentially multiple storylines, which are what happened to Edith Finch's family members, because she's returning to her family home, trying to find out what happened to them. How did they all die, or where did they go? Just in general, what happened to them, and journaling these things.
Very, very tragic. Did you have any more about informative, just kind of...
Let me see.
Because I think before we start talking about why you and I really like this game, we should maybe talk a little bit more about you.
Okay. Well, I don't know, I've always played video games pretty much my whole life, so I'm very into video games, I'm very into just, geeky things in general, I guess, D&D, cosplay, I don't know, just general geeky, stereotypical geeky things, I guess. So this is definitely stuff I'm interested in, for sure. I love playing video games.
Yeah, right up your alley. And Jason's also my good friend and classmate here at WVU Parkersburg, and she also has a podcast.
Yes, MP4 or Media Per 4, because there are 4 of us on that podcast. It's me, Zane, Oliver, and Connor, who are all also classmates of ours, so.
Yeah, and I was on that podcast, so, you gotta look out for our little collab episode.
Yeah, I believe that was episode 4, if I'm remembering correctly.
I honestly don't remember.
That's okay. I don't
I have no
expect
idea.
you. You're just our special
I'm just the guest.
Yeah.
I'm just there. Yeah.
And it is like a game show-esque style podcast in a way, but we do talk about media as well, like Niche Knacks does. So there's that. We do talk about various kinds of medias, though. It's not just video games or
just niche things.
Yeah. It's more broad, but we, like I said, for the game show aspect, there is a specific person set for a host each episode, and that host changes every episode, because whoever has the most interesting topic that they brought for that week, whoever the host is, gets to choose which topic wins, and therefore the winner becomes the next host and chooses the theme for the next episode.
And that's their podcast, Media for Four. Where can we watch it?
As far as I'm aware, it'll probably be on Spotify, YouTube, and I'm not entirely sure where else as of right now, but it'll definitely be at least on those. And there is just an audio format as well as a video and audio format of it.
Yeah, unlike me, who has no video, you just get to listen to my nice sultry voice every episode. But now we have our guest. So do you want to talk more about what remains of Edith Finch?
Definitely. Real quick, I do just want to say for anybody who might pop over to the Media Per 4 podcast, it is very chaotic. There's a lot that happens. It's a lot. That's it. So if you want to join in on the chaos, there you go. But definitely stick with Niche Knacks as well. Don't stray the path.
Don't stray the path away. True. No, you should check out their podcast.
Well, thank you. So with this game, with What Remains of Edith Finch, you're playing as 17-year-old Edith Finch. I don't think I really said that yet, but she's returning to her family home, like I said, journaling the story of her trip there, childhood memories, stories of her family members that live there, and again, just trying to learn what happened there. And as you're going through this, she learns that she's actually the last surviving member of her family. And that's part of why she's trying to figure out what happened to the other family members.
I'm really interested to talk about the end because of that. But should we? I don't know how exactly you wanted to talk about it. If you wanted to talk about specific aspects, or maybe like talk about each family member, because if people are unaware of what the game's about, you basically have to play through a story of pretty much every family member's death. So that could be, I don't know if you want to go by family member or if you had another way.
We can. I'll probably have to.
I'm gonna have to look. Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't if we both have to look up stuff. What about how instead your favorite? What was your favorite family member in their like game scene?
I don't know. I mean, probably the one where you turn into a cat for part of it. Do you remember that? You're like climbing out the window and then climbing in a tree.
I forget her name. The kid, but it was a little girl, and that scene is really interesting because it's not just a cat. I think she turns into a bird and a shark as well, and the whole thing, which I feel like we just kind of have to talk spoilers for this game.
Yeah,
it just is
definitely
like, I feel like the extensive of the informative thing, that's your spoiler-free talk because most of it, I just feel like it's kind of hard to talk about without spoilers.
Yeah, the one who turns into the cat, bird, shark, whatever, so on, is Molly Finch. She was 10 years old at the time of her death. Let me see. I'm trying to remember if she is like the aunt of Edith or what the exact family lineage.
I'm pretty sure she's the, like, her grandma's daughter, so I think that it is her aunt, but so the scene is very fantastical, and we find out later that like everything was in her mind. She died because she ate like poisonous berries and toothpaste because her mother was like purposely starving her, which is horrible.
Yeah, she was sent to bed without dinner that night by her mother, and then went through this thing of where she was apparently changing into different animals. At least that's how the gameplay for it is. I don't know what exactly was going through her mind for that.
Her descent into starvation, which is absolutely sad. She's a 10-year-old little girl.
Mm-hmm. And like Augustine said, ate various non-edible items, or just, things that you probably shouldn't really eat in general, even if you could technically, just don't.
Yeah, I know. I think the reason why she keeps turning into different animals is because of this hunger that's expressed throughout the scene. I don't know what they're called, like I guess segments is probably the better word. But it's definitely a common theme. So the grandma, her name is also Edith, right? That's Edith Senior, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. It's a very common theme that Edith Senior is kind of like the root of a lot of the family issues. There's a lot of neglect and bad things that go on. Several children. A lot of the family members that have died were actual children. So, that's part of where I was talking about the death warning is, you don't want to see children die, especially due to neglect. You may want to avoid it.
Yeah, if you are worried about seeing it, again, it is first person. So
very vague.
Watching a person actually die somehow. And these deaths are very strange the way they play out.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not gonna... I don't think that
there's no gore.
Yeah, it doesn't really ever show anything vulgar in it.
It's just implied.
Yeah.
And there's one thing I really also want to talk about too. I don't know, but first, the storytelling is what I really like about it. I really like how the deaths are portrayed and how we learn about these family members, because the entire game is basically narrated by Edith Jr. when you go through, and she just like talks to you. I think during the segments, like Molly, we hear her inner thoughts. So we do hear like some other dialogue, but a lot of it is kind of Edith just talking to almost us, the audience, but it's really like her journal.
Yeah.
So I really like how the story's portrayed, and the death segments are probably just like the most notable part of the game. And the art style, for the most part, I think is like the same. It's like a 3D model. I like the style a lot. It's not super realistic. It's just like a nice, clean 3D model style. I like it a lot.
Mm-hmm. I'd say it kind of almost reminds me of, like, if you've heard of the game Tell Me Why. It's made by some of the same people that made Life is Strange.
I've not heard of it, actually.
Okay, well, it somewhat reminds me of that, except there definitely is differences. It's not quite the same, but just the general
vibe. Yeah, the style I feel like that Edith Finch uses is pretty just like common in indie games, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just nice. So let's see. Oh, yeah, the writing is just really good, and I just feel like we just gotta talk more about the death scenes, because that's just like really the big thing. I think one of the most kind of graphic is, I don't remember like any of their names, but it's about, she's a teenager, and it's basically a home intruder story, and this is where the main art style differentiation comes in. In this segment, there's a lot of comic book panels that we see, because she was like a child star, and her scene's a bit vague, but she gets murdered by like people who break into her house.
Yeah, it's Barbara. That's which one it was, and she was 16 at the time of death. And her father and mother were Sven and Edie, I guess is what they are called, like her nickname or something. But the grandmother of the family. So let me see. But yeah, I also made it a point to try to point out where the art style changes, because it shows going through the comic book that was made for where she was just where it has her death leading in from where she was a child star and everything.
Yeah.
Because that plays a big part into her death in that segment.
Yeah, I remember it's like kind of dark, because I think the last thing you see in that segment is like a literal panel of her like being torn apart. Or it's like implied that's what happened, and it's just kind of like some of the stuff is pretty dark. I would not say that's the worst. The worst is definitely the baby, who I also don't remember his name. That felt really like, it's not like so dark as it is just kind of disturbing. There's like a baby, and I believe it might be like Edith's cousin or something, because like he was in a bath and the mom was like on the phone and basically he drowned. And the segment that we see is very fantastical. This is from the baby's point of view. We see like the bath toys like jumping around. They're like alive as we see the bath water slowly fills up, and eventually he's underwater. And I think we actually hear the phone call between the baby's mom and dad, and because that was a big thing. They got divorced, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, because she accidentally killed her child, but neglect is a very common theme.
Yeah, that was a big thing for it. That one was also interesting, but again, like you said, obviously very morbid, because there was a literal infant just playing in the bath. And
it's also, I think, compared to some of the other deaths, probably one of the most realistic, and that's why I think it kind of hits a lot more. Like some of the other children, one of the child, he like really wants to be an astronaut, and like he dies because he was on a tire swing or just some sort of swing and like fell off the swing down a cliff and died, that's a bit more, it's a bit more fantastical. That segment was also really short too.
Yeah, those are all of these deaths are very strange and out there, that's for sure.
Yeah, except for, I think the baby one is just like the most like
yeah.
And it's just sad. There is one that's incredibly fantastical, and like we don't even really know how he died, but I definitely want to talk about it because it actually incorporates one of the other developers' games. I think it's Maxwell. Is that what his name was?
Well, I can't remember either. Let me
I should look up a list of the Finches.
That's what I pulled up here. There's a Milton.
Oh, I think it's probably Milton. I knew it was like an M. So like,
he was 11 at time of disappearance.
He disappears and like he disappears into another actual dimension. Like that's what happened to this kid. Which is really interesting. And he's a character in another one of the games. And I don't remember what the other game was called, but the other game was made first, which is interesting.
That is interesting. I didn't know they had another one and it tied in.
Yes.
This.
At least it's like heavily implied, because if you see all the characters in Edith Finch have like portraits of themselves on wood that I believe the grandmother painted herself. Because there's like a conflict in the game that like the grandma wants to preserve everything, and she like makes the house really fantastical, and she kind of makes the deaths more fantastical than they really are. I think there's like an element of the grandma lying, and Edith's mom hates it and wants to like, you remember that, right? Yeah, she hates it.
She did not want to be a part of that anymore. She was like, I am done with all this nonsense. I'm not doing it.
Yeah. It's just kind of funny, but also awful. I'm trying to think, who else?
There was, let me see here. I believe it was Sam, so Edith's grandfather. He was the one that...
I think Sam was her dad.
I don't know. On this list that I'm using, it said grandfather.
Oh, maybe that's... Oh, I think you're right. Because he gets, like, pushed off a cliff by a deer.
Yeah, because he was into hunting and watching and whatnot. And he was 33 at the time of his death.
Yeah.
But there's that.
Because that's... he was with the little girl and was with Edith's mom, Dawn.
Yeah.
Which I don't think Dawn is... I don't think she's not dead, isn't she? I don't know if it discussed what happened to her.
I'm not
There's a lot of... This is like a pretty big family.
Yes, it is a giant family, so it is very hard to keep track of everybody and remember everybody. She is dead too, it looks like. Let me see. Died at 48, yep. Okay. She died of an unknown disease at the age of 48 years old when her daughter was only 16.
I remember that because that's how Edith dies. Spoilers, the entire time you're going through the house, you're actually playing as Edith's kid. You're not, it's implied that you are Edith, but you're not. Edith is also dead, so you're Edith's child. I don't remember what the kid's name is.
Christopher.
Yeah, you're actually Christopher, like, learning about your family. which I thought was really cool. And I was like, no way, everyone, including the person we thought we were, is also dead.
It's an insane plot twist. I was not prepared for that either whenever I first was watching somebody play this game, but that's how it ends, and it's wild. That's definitely a strange one.
It's I almost feel like going down the list of the family members.
But yeah, you find out Edith died during childbirth at the very end, and so you're actually playing as her son Christopher, even though in the very beginning it makes you think you are playing as Edith herself while she is 17, I believe.
Yeah.
At the time.
I do think at the end of the game, don't you see what Christopher looks like? Isn't there like a third person perspective? Doesn't he lay something on Edith's grave, and that's how you find out?
Yeah, I think there's something like that. I'm not sure if I can't remember if it goes into a third person perspective. I want to say it does too, but he definitely is over by the grave.
We know that Edith is dead and died during childbirth.
But there is, with that, and with all these weird family deaths, if I remember correctly, at part of their weird wacky house, because it is built insane, because they just kept adding on
different rooms. When you're going through, you have to climb through the most tiny little hallways. It's very interesting.
Secret tunnels and all kinds of things. Because where there are puzzles in these games, you have to unlock different rooms to get into and whatnot as you go along, which I wouldn't say these puzzles are super difficult or anything. Plus, it's not like you couldn't look it up if you couldn't get past it. But, it's definitely interesting. But if I remember correctly, the family has, their own graveyard, essentially. I don't know what exactly to call it. It's not really a graveyard, but you know what I'm talking about?
Because there's a bunch of stones and stuff. It's outside the house because they live on the shore, as we see.
Yeah. But I think that's an interesting thing to note. They essentially have the family memorial grave site thing in there, especially with the whole game basically being about the family deaths.
Yeah, I was reading, I don't remember this, because I thought we should start. I remember, they came to the shore. I don't know if they're on an island. I don't think so, because there's a train on it. Yeah. But they came to the shore on a boat, if I remember correctly, and tried to build the house. I believe the original Finch father died.
Yeah.
And then the house, because there's unless I'm thinking of something else, but if you're kind of confirming, you see a little thing out in the distance that was the first house, and then Sven, unless Sven was I thought Sven was the one, but it says Sven died in a different way. So
there was one name up here. I don't see it now, but it was Oglenvoy or something. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but I believe that's the original father figure of the house that first went to that land and made their first house.
Because it gets washed away, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But the one who made the big fantastical one is Sven, and that's Edie's husband. And apparently which I don't even remember this, but the way he died, he created a dragon-shaped slide that crushed him during his son's 12th birthday. Which I don't remember
as well either. I feel like I mostly remember, the ones we've already talked about, and there's the one where he was harder to figure out what happened to him because he's down in that hidden bunker.
Yeah, that's Walter.
Yeah.
But I don't remember it mentioning, I remember the name Sven, but I don't remember mentioning him dying. Odin was the one who died at sea. But that was Edie's dad.
Basically, this whole family is cursed.
Yeah.
Really, and some.
Pretty much. Okay, Edie's father, Odin, was the man who died at sea. Then Sven and their daughter Molly, Sven, Edie, and Molly went and they built the actual house that we see in the game. And the graveyard is where Odin was buried that we see.
Okay.
7 years later, they have Barbara, which is the child star. This was also in the 40s.
Yeah.
This is a very long time ago. So 40s was when Barbara was born. December 13th, 1947 is when Molly dies. It's because she ate some berries, durable food, and toothpaste. That was 2 days after her 10th birthday. Then, 3 years after Molly's death, they have twins, Sam and Calvin. Calvin is the kid who flew off the swing and down the cliff.
Yeah.
Sam is Dawn's dad. So Sam is Edith's grandfather.
Yes.
Who was divorced.
It's okay if you can't keep track of all of this.
Just go play the game. Go watch the game. It is a lot because it's like it's up to great. We have the great. Then we get the great. It's just a lot. It's just a lot. Okay. After they have their twins, 2 years later, then they have Walter. In 1952. Then the day of Barbara's 16th birthday, Barbara was killed. She was murdered. Edie, the reason why she was killed was because they were like home alone because Edie had to take Sven to the hospital. Then Calvin, a year later, fell off a swing and died. He was 11. And then Sven died 2 months after his 49th birthday, making a dragon for Walter. And when we see Walter, he's also an old man, because obviously, like, Edie is, like, super old.
I actually wanted to talk a little bit about his death, just because I feel like it's a bit different than some of the other ones. I mean, they're all completely different from each other, but I feel like this one is just a whole nother thing to it in a way. Because apparently, I guess he was traumatized as a child by Barbara's death. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And this led him to hide in, like, a secret bunker thing underneath the house, and basically for the rest of the family, he just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
And he lived in there for, like, 30 years or something. I don't know. A long time. And on his last day alive, he finally finds the courage to venture out of the bunker.
He gets hit by a train.
And so whenever you're actually playing as him, you start in the bunker and you're sitting there and you see where he has like a calendar in there, and basically he lives every single day the exact same. So at a certain time he eats his can of peaches, at a certain time he does whatever else, like exactly the
days
same.
go by.
Yep.
And it's not going well for a Walter, which I can't blame him. And then, yeah, he walks outside and immediately gets hit by a fucking train. And I do think the idea of them being cursed does get it's brought up as well.
And going back to Barbara a little bit, with where, like we were saying earlier, that her death very much so plays into her thing of her past, of her being a child star, because it leads into this whole thing from her being a child star of, like, her being in a horror show of some sort of horror media, and they're telling her that she can't scream right for it. She can't do a good enough scream that sounds realistic.
Yeah, I remember that. Because at the end, she screams.
Yeah, at the end, she screams bloody murder, because that's when
she's dying.
Goes over to the intruder, breaking in and unaliving her.
Yeah. You just say kill. She's dying. She's killed. Yeah.
And then I don't know, is there anything particular you want to say real quick before I talk about the next thing?
I was just gonna, like, go through, because there's some other ones. Gus is the name of the baby who drowned in the bathtub. There's also Gregory. Oh, Gregory was the baby. Gus was the kid who died at the wedding, like, during the hurricane. He was just flying a kite. That was Gus. He was, like... Which is sad. He was also, like, a kid who died. Then, yeah, Sam was married to a lady named Kay, and they get divorced. And there's also... So Edith has two brothers. Milton, who's the one we see. No, I don't even really know what we see happen to him. I think we just see him like leaf through a painting, and that's all we see because he's in another game of theirs. Let me see. Okay, he is the character. Milton is the king in the game, The Unfinished Swan, which he's one of the major characters in that game, and
I need to check out that game.
I tried watching through it, but I think I got bored. It's not as compelling. I don't think it's the concept of The Unfinished Swan is I'm pretty sure everything is white, and you basically just like throw paint blobs and like move throughout the world.
Okay.
There's a story to it. I don't know what it is. And the other one is Lewis, and Lewis has a very interesting death too. Is that what you wanted to talk about?
Yes, he's the one I want to start talking about.
You go ahead and talk about it.
Okay. Basically, with his death, he's working in a fish factory, and throughout this whole time, he's daydreaming constantly, and he starts daydreaming more and more and more. Like maladaptive.
Yeah, he's mentally ill, I'm pretty sure, and he is a pothead. He smokes a lot of weed.
Yeah, because he is constantly living in his head, essentially. So he's going through the factory like normal, and throughout this, you cut back and forth between chopping up the fish in the factory and his daydreams where he's like traveling in almost like a medieval world, I guess you could say, where there is a monarchy because he ends up like becoming the king, and that leads to his death later. So you keep switching back and forth until eventually where he's supposed to become the king of this land that he saved or whatever. He is actually kneeling down into a giant guillotine is what it shows on the screen, and then I think it cuts back to the factory and you find out like he dies in the factory from where he was daydreaming so much.
Yeah, I think it mentions he had a therapist too, but like things didn't go well, obviously, because he ended up killing himself, but on not on purpose, because he was just really mentally ill. But I think a lot of it, basically, generational trauma is kind of what the main theme of what Remains of Edith Finch is, because a lot of it is Dawn and Edie's relationship, because we see, like, Edith's mom does not like her grandma.
Yeah, there's definitely complications between family relationships, for sure.
Yes. I remember during Sam's death, which is Dawn's mom, and Edith's grandpa, like, I believe Dawn, like, they're going hunting because he was into hunting, Sam, and Dawn was not. And he was, like, trying to shoot a deer, and he wanted Dawn to take a picture of it. So we see, like, pictures snapping in between him falling off the cliff. That's kind of, like, what happens. And so her dad basically made her do something she didn't want to do, and he died because of it, which is obviously traumatizing because she was a young girl during that. And also we see, like, the reason why the doors are locked is because of the mom, because she doesn't want Edith to find out about all the shit the grandma is, like, doing, because grandma's making a bunch of memorials, and, like, I think it also says that she tells the news, like, a kind of fantastical versions, like, she makes it a big deal. She's, like, really celebrating these deaths in a way that her mom does not like.
Yeah.
It's what I believe.
Yeah, I can see that, especially with, again, where you're saying, like, the locked rooms keeping people out of service, because that happened throughout a few different generations of the family, I think. They just locked off.
Yeah.
Like, some of the people who died previously, their room is locked off. Nobody's allowed to go in there except Edie, the grandmother of the family.
And we do see, like, even with that, Edie locked Molly in her room, basically, without dinner, and that's why she died. So there's just a lot of themes with that. It's really interesting. There is some most of it that we see is actual, like, artwork, but I did find, like, what presumably looks like an actual picture of Sam and Calvin, because Calvin he's wearing an astronaut suit. Well, this one's definitely art, so there's some, like, we see, like, what the family looks like too. which is interesting. Also, Edie lived through, like, all of them. Like, she was the one who made these memorials because Edie died at, like, 93 or something.
Yeah.
She died in 2010, which is really interesting. But yeah, I really like the conflict, and that we see that the family is, I would say they probably are cursed.
Definitely. Like, if I were a part of that family, at that point, I would just be like, well, I'm gonna die. I'm not having any kids, that's for sure. No point. Everybody's just gonna die. Not doing it. I'll just do whatever. Live life until whatever happens.
There's another surviving member, which I didn't know about. It's not just Christopher. It's a character named Monroe. Is the son of Milton.
Oh, okay.
He is the protagonist of The Unfinished Swan. So that's interesting.
That is interesting.
Which means Milton dies? I mean, technically he's not in the human world. So I don't know. That's kind of interesting.
I guess he's presumably dead, or he just doesn't matter anymore. Apparently, maybe he's in another universe or something.
Oh, it says, by the end of The Unfinished Swan, the king is indicated to be on the verge of death. His powers are failing, he senses his own death, and sees himself attending his own funeral. Come to reflect on his life and become content with the impertinence of his creations. After waking up upon Monroe's, his son's arrival, and passing on the paintbrush to him, the king asks to leave quickly as none of this will last for long. So yeah, he dies in The Unfinished Swan.
That's really interesting. I really like that they have two games kind of intertwined like that. I think that's so fascinating.
It is. It's really interesting because it's like, how the hell did this boy enter this dimension? Yeah. And he also, I think, created it too. It's really weird. And like, The Unfinished Swan came first. So it's kind of interesting that they were like, you know what? Let's make this character have an entire family. And this family also went and died. Or, because I don't think any of the other ones disappeared. They all died except for him, who disappeared and then I guess died, apparently. But yeah. So Monroe, I guess, is still alive. His son. So, but Christopher, we don't see Monroe in What Remains of Edith. Yeah, we just see Christopher.
But yeah, I feel like we can't do this game justice just trying to explain things, because with the...
You do see a third person.
Okay, yep. But with the specific art, like having it actually displayed to you and not just us trying to describe everything is 1,000 times better. Like, I really can't do justice just trying to explain things, because even talking about the stories and specific deaths, that's still... like, there's still so much more detail to it.
Yeah, because it's a whole family, and they have their own lore and their own relationships, and we see a lot of it, like, we hear it from Edith's perspective, so I do think it's one of those things that you kind of have to, like, you could talk about a movie all you want, but you should probably, like, this one specifically, you just kind of need to watch, because a lot of it is specifically characters and their relationships with one another.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of detail into this game. Like, even just for example, going back to Lewis, where you're playing through his daydreaming and while he's working at his job, it's like very strange switching back and forth. You almost don't even know exactly what to expect with it, where his death is coming. Just like, I mean, they make it intense towards the end where you know what's going to happen. Like, there's definitely an intensity to this game with the various deaths, but it's just with switching back to the daydreaming part, you're just like sailing a ship down a river and making different choices along the way for if he's going to be a king and marry a queen or marry a king or whatever, just anything, any various choices that he's going on in this world inside his head. And then all of a sudden you're switching back into cutting off the heads of fish in a factory.
Yeah, I like that. You're switching between, and it really shows that he's just thinking about this while he's cutting up some fish. But yeah, I really like how it's presented, and the narrative is really interesting. and I like stories about like generational trauma. I guess it's interesting. I was a huge fan of Encanto, which is kind of similar without all the death.
Yeah, similar vibes with the family issues, but not quite the same.
Grandma being a big issue too.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of with this too, is now that we're talking about it, I'm like, this is reminding me of Encanto because of the family issues and specifically it leading back to the grandmother of the family.
Well, I guess Edie's technically the great grandma of Edith, but it's Dawn's grandma, so there's that. But I definitely think it would hit home a lot for a lot of people who have like family issues like that. Hopefully not your family dying in weird ways, but
definitely not.
Hopefully it doesn't hit too close.
Bizarre deaths. Like, I'm so sorry if that does hit to home.
Me too. Like, that's very sad.
It's rough.
Hope your relative did not paint or disappear into the paint dimension like Milton did.
Oh yeah. Don't want to go to that paint dimension.
The paint dimension.
You don't know what's gonna happen there.
I don't know what's gonna happen because I haven't watched the game.
Same.
Who knows? He dies. Don't die in the paint dimension.
Maybe some people do know though, but
not me. See, I'm not one of them. But I think the music's also pretty good.
Yes.
It's very, I don't know like any notable songs, but I know it definitely like helps every segment. The music plays a lot like into it and it creates the vibes too. I don't know if there's anything else of note.
I want to go back to like the art style and graphics just for a second. There are specific scenes where they have certain lighting effects that are just so good. They look so good. I very much so appreciate different lighting effects in video games. Like that is something I always notice, and they're just I can't think of exactly where they are in the game, like specific places that have various lighting effects that look good, but there are some in there that I'm just like, yes.
Carol, I think the game is very pretty, just in general. I think it looks great. And it's also not super long. I don't think it's only like maybe 3 hours at most. It's not really long, is it?
I don't think it's too long. I don't know. Are you looking that up?
I'm gonna look that up.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think it's super long either.
Oh, it's not even 2 hours. It's literally an hour and 45 minutes long. So highly recommend watching it. And there's a lot of like people talking about and like analyzing the deaths and like the inner family turmoil. So it's pretty interesting, but I highly recommend it.
Me too. I'm sure there is a lot of lore and conspiracy
we did not cover
with this game as well. But yeah, I highly recommend anybody really to check this out if they are interested in it, because again, it is so rich in the story. It's really good.
Yeah, I remember. I watched it about when the new episodes of Da Hung Bam Scared came out. So I was like, well, all this new media, I was really excited about it. Yeah. Highly recommend. I don't know if I have anything else to add.
I don't think I really do either. I think that pretty much covers the majority of it without trying to give away too much.
I feel like we gave away everything.
Yeah, we gave away a lot, but since it is almost more like watching a TV show,
you just have to experience it, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say with that too.
Yeah, do you have any closing thoughts? Plug your podcast again.
I don't know. I mean, there is another little game I could mention real quick. Obviously, we're not gonna do an analysis on that too or anything, but just like an honorable mention of my own.
Honorable knack.
Because it is an indie game and it's very recent, like a very new game. And from what I've seen of it so far, it looks really good. It's called Children of Silent Town. I believe it just released January 17th or somewhere around there. It is on Steam. I don't know about anywhere else as of right now. But if you're a fan of games like Sally Face, Night in the Woods, or Little Misfortune, things similar to
I
those.
do love Little Misfortune.
This gives me vibes of that, and the art style kind of reminds me of Don't Starve Together.
I do love Don't Starve Together.
It looks very good. It looks very promising from what I've seen so far. So
Have you watched like gameplay of it, or just not some of it?
a little bit. I haven't gotten super into it yet, but I have seen a little bit, and from that bit, it does seem interesting. You're playing as Lucy, a little girl, in this village that's surrounded by a forest, and the forest has various monsters in it, so the parents won't let the kids go out at nighttime, and that's part of the whole thing. And then Lucy, well, there's lots of disappearances in the town with
Because all the monsters.
and Lucy decided she's old enough to start investigating and exploring on her own, and that's sort of
The premise. That sounds really interesting. I'll have to look it up because I do love a good old click and point adventure with some monsters for sure.
But that's pretty much it. Again, I'm Jacelyn from Media Per 4.
And watch the podcast on YouTube and Spotify and anywhere else.
And if you want to see Augustine on Media Per 4, again, I believe that is the 4th episode.
It's the one with symbolism, whichever one symbolism is the topic of. I'm there. And I gave a really good little speech on my media, and I won't spoil it for the audience, but
It was very fun.
very
And
fun.
very much so like your topic.
Thank you.
It's good.
You'll have to watch it if you haven't yet.
Yes.
Well, sounds like if you're into heart-wrenching, disturbing story games, What Remains of Edith Finch might just be your niche. And if you like click and point adventure games, maybe Children of Silent Town will be your niche as well. Keep a lookout for your next Niche Knack. Next week, I'll cover a non-niche media in a niche way, the Just Dance lore.